In the past 5 to 10 years, there's been a subtle change in the world of rock music, where what was seemingly a male-dominated genre has now by and large been carried by the emergence of more and more female rock bands who are getting mainstream attention. From bands like Wet Leg, Emil and the Sniffers, Eliza and the Delusionals, and Boy Genius to solo acts like St. Vincent and Phoebe Bridgers, and even including pop artists who have gone rock lately such as Demi Lovato, Olivia Rodrigo, and Billie Eilish, there seems to be a huge desire to bring rock music back from fans and artists alike. But it seems that the way it is making a comeback by and large is through female voices. Now I want to be clear that in countries outside of the United States, there already have been major contributions from female rock bands that are wildly popular and successful, such as Band Made in Japan, The Warning from Mexico, who just released their full-length album in June of 2024, and other ones like Florence and the Machine from the United Kingdom as examples. With the various genres in rock, it is hard to really say which ones are being reborn, but if we focus on pop rock and indie rock, then it is easy to see that the bands that generate the most interest right now are usually female-led or all-female bands. To discuss this topic and to dig into her own music, I've brought on San Diego local indie rock artist Tamar Berk to talk about the rise of female rock musicians and discuss her upcoming album, Good Times for a Change, which comes out on September 6, 2024. Stick around to hear what she thinks of the glass ceiling being shattered in rock music. All right, so Tamar Berk, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come talk to us. It's going to be an absolutely epic conversation, I think, because many people, obviously, we were just talking before we came on about, when they talk about women's rock, they don't get too, deep. They want to talk about the surface level, like, oh, what's your opinion about women in rock? It's like, well, that's a pretty vague and broad characterization or a question to ask. So, before we dig into kind of your perspective on female rock, like, let's talk about you, because obviously you are a female rock musician, but let's get up to speed with people who aren't familiar with you, and then we'll talk about your perspective on this diversification of rock music. But go ahead and give me kind of like a little bit about your journey into rock music, because in my opinion, you're kind of like, a powerhouse rock musician that people need to hear about, and you create, more relatable and accessible music to rock fans of any genre, right? So like, you don't just stick to like pop rock or indie rock, you kind of delve into these other things. So kind of what inspired you to write this type of music and kind of flow around different boundaries here?
I bought my first guitar and I bought a little chord book and I started writing songs on the chord book, but mostly, I was trying to hoppy artists that I liked because I didn't have my own style. So I was like listening to Suzanne Vega and Edie Brickell and Liz Phair and all these artists that were starting to write really personal things about stuff. I mean, Liz Phair for sure, and that whole era with PJ Harvey and Hole and Verk Assault and all these bands that were starting to write these women that were coming out and not being polite and not being just pretty and cute, although I love the Mazzy Stars of the world and the Sundays and that whole genre of really pretty, timid girl. I also love that. But I had more to say, and I was very excited to be inspired when I moved to Chicago by all of this movement that was happening, particularly in the 90s. I mean, the 80s female bands were great, like the Go-Go's and Bananarama and, and the Bangles and Blondie, and Madonna. And like, those were huge influences, Cyndi Lauper. But I think I didn't look at them as, I guess, songwriters, even though I knew they were. I just felt like at the time they were more like performers, so just like and I just really wanted to start writing really intentional lyrics and stuff because I was going through shit, we all do at that time of our lives. So so that's kind of how it started. My first band was in Chicago. I decided I was going to start a band.
And so we're talking mid 90s, late 90s, somewhere in that era. Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously at that time, music was changing a lot. Like the '90s, for what everybody says, when I was living through the '90s, I was thinking to myself, like, man, this generation or this decade kind of sucks compared to like the '70s and '60s. And then I look back and the 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. I'm like, in that period of '90s, like music changed so much. Like you had, pop punk, you had ska, you had, emo, all these things, like alternative grunge, all these different new metal, like it was crazy, even like the female rock stars, right? So like, the Lilith Fair and Lollapalooza,
Yes, Lilith Fair
everything was coming around. It's like, holy shit, there was so much music in the '90s.
Yes.
When you're living through it, it didn't process like how much was going on. And now looking back, you're like, that was like the golden decade. If you look at like how much music kind of transformed itself, especially rock music in that one decade. I think so much to the point where everybody got burnt out on rock music for a while. So that's why it took a back seat to a lot of other genres. But
that's an interesting
when you're talking
point
about like Liz Phair and PJ Harvey and stuff, that and Lisa Loeb, another one, like when I first heard your music, I was like, yeah, Sheryl Crow, Lisa Loeb, Liz Phair, PJ Harvey. This is, Amy Mann. I hear all
Amy
of that
Mann.
stuff coming
I've
out from
gotten
your music.
every single one of those comparisons. But, it's hard to remove the influences that have created the landscape for you. I put a lot of Beatles in my stuff and a lot of ELO and a lot of classical chord progressions and classical, like especially when I'm, tracking some piano. I love doing arpeggios and like creating some like more classical lines and classical things. And you can't get away from the influences. And anytime I pick up a guitar, I think particularly because I was teaching myself in a tiny little studio apartment in a crappy, tiny garbage apartment in Chicago, in the north side of Chicago, and sitting in those four walls and trying to record on a 4-track, and you're teaching yourself. Nobody had money to go to lessons. It wasn't a thing. It was like, if you wanted to do this, you had to do it yourself. And these women
sure as hell didn't have money to go to a studio and pay $2,000 an hour or whatever.
Exactly. And so I really like, if these women can do it, I can. Now, the thing about the '90s that was interesting is because Nirvana came on the scene in such a big way and almost was the resurgence of the band, the garage band, or the the non-hair metal band that was signed by a big label and these huge tours. It was suddenly like these guys like me, like anyone.
Did you tend to stick to this kind of, I guess, indie or rock or pop rock, or did you just want to play all music and every music? Was there something that honed you in on one thing or another?
Well, the confessional nature of stuff like Liz Phair and PJ Harvey was what really inspired me, and I wanted to do that. But I didn't want to use my name. So then you create a band name, and then when you have a band, it feels different, and the messages feel different because you have other people's perspectives and viewpoints. I still wrote all the songs, but they would put their 2 cents in. I like that one, I don't like that one, I think that one rocks, and they would put, so it felt more collaborative, even though maybe from their perspective it's not so collaborative because it's still my songs. But I didn't necessarily tell them what to play on the drums or bass or whatever. I mean, to some degree, I'd be like, I like that, I don't like that. I did create the demos where I played everything. So there was that sort of Pete Townsend thing where it's like, here's the song with all the harmonies and everything. Granted, it never sounded like that in the end because everybody's got their own thing. But, to answer your question, I think I would have, I'm back to that now. Whereas I started that way, but the band, I think I became self-conscious about my true, I guess, lyrical desires and what I wanted to say, and put that aside for what I thought people wanted to hear
Yeah.
at the time. And so I feel like this is just me in retrospect thinking why I never really made it or never really made it back then.
I think there's a lot of bands that out there that when they write music, they especially at the start, you're like, write whatever you want, right? And then they get kind of self-conscious and they're like, well, that one's not hitting as well as we thought. That one's not, and then they start to play reactively, right? So they just think, okay, well, if people like this particular song, we'll just play more of that thing. And then they get self-conscious. Their music becomes a little bit less genuine to them, but, it's still not completely disingenuous because they still like it. They created the first version of it, but they're just kind of recycling that original authenticity a little bit too much. That's why you get bands that play the same song basically for 30 years, and you're like, how is this still going? Like, people still listen to this, but they're still famous. It's crazy, but I agree with you. I think that especially
I know.
From your perspective, I think it's even a little different than say the Foo Fighters. And I'm not going to pick on the Foo Fighters because I love the Foo Fighters, but they have a very specific sound, and they've been making that type of music for a long time. Very early on, it was great because it was something different. Now it's kind of like you've played that 12 albums now. But from your perspective,
I'm also not going to put down the Foo Fighters, but they're not my favorite. And I think what you is that's part of maybe the reason. I admire him greatly, but I would never put the Foo Fighters on to listen to. It's just a personal taste thing, but I think I know what you're saying. And also, you made the point of the band trying to recreate themselves with what worked, but it was also at the time what we were hearing on the radio, and as a female musician, because I know we're going to talk about this, what we were hearing from people in the industry. You need to do this because this is what Alanis Morissette is. You need to do this once the 2000s came because Britney Spears is doing this. It was never like do your own thing, which is more how it is today.
Yeah.
It's more find your own thing, just like in TikTok. Everybody has their own thing, and then people find that and like you. Back then, it was like, we know this works, do that, you know?
And I was going to say the same thing from a female perspective back then, especially as a female perspective. You have this, male rock stars back then kind of had this bit of a leash where they could go out and try something creatively, free. And if it worked, the record label is going to be like, genius, you guys are, Led Zeppelin, you're fucking geniuses, or whoever. They had this leash. Whereas like female rock musicians, it was always like, here's your narrow kind of set of parameters, and you kind of got to work in there because this is what Heart did. This is what the Bangles did. This is what, whoever else did, and Go-Go's and Blondie. If you don't do this, you're not a female rock musician. And then, Alanis Morissette kind of did her own thing, kind of stirred up some shit. And then it became like a little bit more free for a lot of women to kind of do their own thing, I think. All the other people we mentioned did as well. But I think Alanis Morissette really broke that mold wide open and said, I'm not really going to listen to what you're going to tell me. Even though she did have a big record label. I think it was maybe she was Canadian, so she's just like, fuck it. Like, maybe I can just get away with it and see what happens. But,
it's hard
it was
to
very
say.
defiant for a lot of people.
Because there were female musicians doing way cooler shit than she was. But she was the mainstreamer that like hit the airwaves in a hard way, like in a major way, where it was aggressive. And I mean, although Hole and Courtney Love certainly did that, but she was lumped in, I think, a bit with the grunge scene versus, again, the band name Hole versus Alanis Morissette. And there is something to be said about that. Like, I think people still, and maybe it's the same with, male bands and also male, like, solo artists. Like, you do have to categorize them in a way. But I think with women, it's a little different because maybe I'm just seeing it that way, but you look at a female musician, a solo artist, and you also categorize their sound, their look,
Yeah.
and their vibe, like, and I've gotten a lot of different things, but because I write such a different eclectic kind of stuff, like I go from a pop punk song, like on this new forthcoming album, Good Times for a Change, and it's out in September. I have a pop punk song that's like fast and furious, kind of, very Veruca Salt, very Olivia Rodrigo.
Yeah.
And then I have a really quiet, sad kind of song that's very Lana Del Rey-ish.
Yeah.
I don't really fit into a category, but I do fit into, I guess, pop rock, maybe indie pop.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think overall that's what I would say is like you're a pop rock artist, but there's nothing wrong with that. Like pop just means it sounds good to me. I mean, pop is so overrated as a term. Like people are like, oh, you can't be a pop artist. I'm like, well, if you want to be successful, you have to be a pop artist because there's no way you'll be, popular without the pop, right? You have to sound good. Like I know there's like progressive rock bands, metal bands, and all that stuff that are anti-pop, and I get that. Like there is an underground scene of all that, and there always will be hardcore bands, all that stuff, right? But being on the radio is a little bit different. Being playing arena tours, you're always going to be pop. Like, and if you want to aspire to be that, you'll have to have some sort of pop element in it. So I have no problem with pop. I've always said, like, if you want to, pop music is what makes people want to sing along. It's what makes people want to dance, go to your concerts, buy your stuff, right? Like that's the element that makes people want to do that.
It is, and I can't not write a catchy poppy song. Like I try to go in different directions, but inevitably there's always some sort of hook in there. Like there's no way I could write something so mathy or weird that it doesn't have a hook somewhere. That's partially my brain, though. Also, I do have some OCD tendencies. So when you have that, especially for music and art, a repetitive nature is calming to my brain. And in pop music, things repeat. Phrases and melodies repeat. And it's calming to me. It's actually a lot of the reason when I write, I enjoy, I know this sounds strange, but I listen to my songs a lot. But it's also
not strange. I still listen to all the songs I write. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very calming too, because it's like something that my brain reacts to in a way that feels like a melody I need to hear. I don't know how else to put it. Like,
that's a great way to put it, because it's like, I wrote this song when I felt this way once. Now I feel that way, or I want to feel that way again. So I want to play that song because that's what it reminds me of. It kind of, it's not nostalgia. It's like
it's comforting,
connecting past and present in your soul or something weird like that.
Yes, for sure, lyrically, but even musically, because when you're talking about pop music, it repeats. Parts repeat. The catchy parts repeat.
Do you think that, like, because obviously you started writing these 4 new albums under your new, your own name.
Yes.
Basically in 2020, a little earlier than that, but you started releasing them over the last 4 years. Do you think that the pandemic had there's this like growing awareness of like mental health, equality and equity, social justice and all that stuff? Do you think some of that is kind of helping to propel female artists forward, or do you feel this was kind of naturally coming after just, so many years of like building towards it?
I think it's all of the above, honestly, because, and I can only speak for myself, but I know that when I was younger and would go to a studio to record, it was just, it was a sausage fest, to be honest. I mean, I hate saying it like that, but like, it was always it's a girl band, or, I've heard some of the most offensive comments in a studio setting where I'm paying. And it's just very shocking, and part of it, and I bring this up because I think it was probably not just me, but at that point I was just like, fuck this. I need to learn how to do myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to sit in a room with some dude who has an opinion about me and calls me or thinks that I'm like super directorial, or I don't know what I'm talking about, or has to argue with my opinion or my thoughts, or just rude about my playing. You know,
Yeah.
all of the above has happened to me. And I guarantee it's happened to other women. And I'm not saying that I'm not angry I'm not angry about it anymore, because guess what? I fucking fixed it, and now I know what to fucking do. And I'm producing my own stuff, and I use Pro Tools, and I use the professional stuff. And I still have people that work with me who are men, but they also are different kinds of men. I don't know how else to say that, but there are men that like really understand a woman's sensibility and how they communicate. And there are those that don't. And when you're trying to create something with the kind of men that is more about their ego than about working with you, it's awful. It's really awful. And it makes the whole thing so negative. And for me, when this has happened, it puts such a damper on my songs and my album. And I can't tell you how many times I was like, how dare you fuck with my art and put a negative energy into it because you're a jerk. Yeah. You know, I mean, I hate going into that place, but there's been a lot of times where I'm like, how dare you? Don't work with me then. Don't work with me if you put your negative bullshit energy because you have some ego or you have an opinion. Like, just be nice. Just be like, yay, maybe it's not working out working with you. Like, I have some other suggestions, or, you know, hey, not everyone works and gels well together. There's nothing wrong with that, you know? Yeah. But I can't tell you how many times. And it's like, okay, fucking get some balls and be honest. Yeah. Just be honest. And luckily I solved the problem. I have my own studio. I produce my own shit. Of course I need help, but nobody does things in a silo. And, but the people that I trust. And so to answer your question, the pandemic probably made a lot of younger artists, women, female, who were like songwriters, have to like go to and get some sort of recording device, because like I was forced to do that because of my experiences. I was like, I'm not gonna fucking do that anymore. I'm gonna do it myself. Yeah. But I think maybe some of the younger artists, the pandemic said, okay, well, you can't record in a studio, but you're playing and you're writing. You better go buy yourself a 4-track. You better go buy yourself some sort of DAW, Logic, or Pro Tools and learn it. And I love that, because that's why there's such an explosion now. And just women. I do think the pandemic was like big force in making people like sit down and learn some kind of program.
Yeah, and I don't think that there was like necessarily an explosion of female artists after the pandemic or anything, but I think right now, it seems like in the world of rock music, if you are a more successful band or artist, it's usually female-led or female-driven, which is pretty cool, because like males have, you know, typically been the ones playing rock music for so long. But and it's not to say that there's not a ton of rock bands out there that are male-driven or male bands. There's a ton, right? There's no end to it. But I think that the ones that are cropping up and becoming more popular seem to be women fronted or women driven or all female, you know. Bands,
agree. Women are killing it right now.
This many kind of come up at the top so quickly, I think, before.
I agree. They're killing it right now, for sure. Yeah. You know, and I still think in the end of the day, maybe don't think of yourself as a woman or man in art. Right from the heart, because we're all human anyway. So that's kind of where I'm standing. I mean, I can't get away from being a female because I'm a female in a relationship. I'm also a mother. I can't get away from that, but I still try to write in a universal way that doesn't necessarily depict just the femaleness of it.
Yeah.
And I think,
I think that's what most good songwriters will do is they'll try to pick something that anybody, both man and woman, they, them, us, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Can understand that as like heartbreak or happiness, sadness, like it's the emotions and the intentions, right? Not the specific like, hey, this is what I went through because I'm a woman, or this is what I went through because I'm a man. If you have to point that out, I think it really cheapens a song.
It's hard because I do see men getting up there with really good bodies and and dancing around and gyrating, but it's not on the same level.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Well, I mean, not essentially, but then you have, stuff like Magic Mike the movie, right? So that is essentially strippers, right? I mean,
but they're not hiding the fact that they're strippers. Like that's his job.
Not like they're trying to be, singer-songwriter that also strips, right?
Right.
That's just one thing. I think as male rock musicians, I think they're not required to, show off their bodies. If they want to, they can. Whereas a lot of females feel like they might have to in order to get more
exactly.
Successful.
So that is what ties up this conversation with a nice little bow, is what you said. So it's not like I'm criticizing it because I know the kind of pressure that is happening. But then when you look like somebody who's fucking awesome, like Chappell Roan, who one day might be wearing that along with her entire band, but then the next day will be wearing a football jersey, and because she goes every show she's wearing something else, so that's like her thing. I mean, to each their own. I don't get inspired by that. I get inspired by, I literally get inspired by, somebody like Lana Del Rey, who literally will just stand there and sing.
Yeah.
And I just feel so emotional about it because she's telling a story that's so true to her. So that's just me, though,
Yeah, and we kind of already delved into some of the questions about, kind of how the new rock stars, have become women, but versus just men. But I think that there's a couple specific things that help contribute to this as well. And I think the first thing is, the ability for females to jump genres and nobody bat an eye at. Like Post Malone's probably maybe Machine Gun Kelly are kind of one or two of the only ones, maybe Justin Bieber a little bit, I guess, kind of jump genres and still nobody really care, right? But like female artists have kind of always done this, right? Like even, Shania Twain was writing basically rock songs, back in the day, but you got like Demi Lovato now. You've got so many other musicians who can just make any sort of, like you said, Olivia Rodrigo is a good example. They just make any kind of music that they want. Do you think that kind of helps with the overall appeal of female musicians? Whereas rock music, as men, rock musicians, they usually think, well, I got to stick within my own wheelhouse, which is this type of rock, grunge, or whatever it is, right?
I don't know how men think about it.
I'll tell you, that's kind of how men think about it. Is like, if I go out and write a pop song, people are going to think I'm a sellout, right? Like that's what they think. They think that everybody thinks that they're a fraud now.
I see. So then there is some sort of pressure on that because I can see that. I can see that men have sort of they're pigeonholed immediately based on their first album or whatever they put out. And rock is so masculine. It's so like, it's still got that old school vibe to it.
Yeah.
But then you've got like Emil and the Sniffers, Amy and the, she is awesome, and she is as tough as they come. That's definitely rock and roll. I mean, in every sense of the word. I mean, Beyonce deciding to put a country album out. I think maybe it is easier, but I also think that women are more likely to be trailblazers and are just going to start doing that too. Like,
Yeah.
women are going to like say try new things, especially if they have a following already. So like if but that is to say, okay, and this could be an entire pod on its own because I've listened to podcasts based on just this thing, which is Liz Phair. So, Liz Phair put out Exile in Guyville and then Whip Smart, which are like in my top 5 albums of all time, both of them. And she puts out Liz Phair, where she worked with The Matrix and put out some of the most awful pop rock songs. I was so sad. So sad. Now, did she jump genres? I think it was more how they were produced also. Because as a producer myself, she wanted a big hit and she needed a big hit. And she went to The Matrix, who worked with Avril Lavigne and all that, and they just like produced the shit out of the songs and made them sound so of the time. Yeah. And I know she still likes those and still likes singing a handful of those because I went to see her play. But the subject matter is just it's what we were saying earlier. It's like, it doesn't feel authentic. It just felt like, ugh. But there's that, production of a song could be the genre. So Taylor Swift. She probably writes, and everything she writes on her guitar probably has sort of a country twang to it, right?
Yeah.
No matter what.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but if she goes to whatever his name is, the guy that she's working with, he's going to put his twist on it, which is going to make it some sort of mellow piano thing, because she'll say, I want it to sound like Lana Del Rey, which she basically stole his whole team and her whole team and used like the same team that Lana Del Rey uses to make that kind of piano ballady, catchy pop stuff. Yeah. So do you consider that genre jumping, or is it, it's also how it's produced and the instrumentation, Maybe men putting out a pop song, I can see people was calling it like power pop, is sort of that weird genre of like Badfinger and like wimpy skinny guys with tight pants and bell bottoms and the power pop look, if you go in that direction. But like, I don't know, power pop is also rock. Yeah. It's just great harmonies and great songs. So, and this is said by many people, like rock is technically dead.
I did a whole episode about it.
Yeah. I don't know. But Beatles were also considered a rock and roll band.
Yeah. Even though back then they technically would have been an R&B band, but yeah.
Yeah. So the terms are fluid, I guess, as fluid as gender, fluidity. It's all what you bring to the table. I mean, people could argue about the shit, and they do. Oh my God. Yep. Facebook, they argue and argue and argue. Now, what's even power pop? Like, that's like such a big argument. But, it's just like kind of, you come to the table with what you think rock and roll is. And generally, it's how you were brought up. I mean, I think when you're a kid, you discover music somehow. Some older brother, some older sister, or some radio station or something happened where you're like, whoa, And so that being said, there are some kids that were brought up on Britney Spears, and that was what was playing. There was no Led Zeppelin. They weren't listening to those stations. Yeah. So is that rock and roll, or is it just pop music, Yeah.
Well, another thing, because, that was kind of the first part, is the genre fluidity, or whatever we want to call it. That's kind of the first part of what I think maybe helps propel females to be able to reach new heights and, broaden their audiences faster. But another thing I think is that social media helps quite in quite a way for female artists, because most female rock artists, or just females in general, are happy to use social media, kind of talk about this, their day, or do makeup tutorials or whatever. Like, they get on social media and use social media. Yes,
that's me.
And whereas men are always thinking like, oh God, this is so annoying. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be on here. But it's kind of like you
right. I do think women have an advantage of it. I don't know why. Maybe, okay, and I'm like throwing this out there as a female. We are used to being looked at, and also have a beauty standard, which is, we don't necessarily want to have a beauty, but there is a beauty standard in the world, which is requiring us to be looked at, to be compared, and maybe it's in our DNA. I'm going back to caveman shit, that a man, or, the male gaze is for, boy, I'm really getting deep here, but like for mating purposes, we want to be attractive. Maybe it's in our DNA to like look good and feel attractive. That's not always for the male gaze, sometimes for the female gaze. I mean, whatever floats your boat. But I do think we have it in us to want to look good and to feel appreciated for our beauty or our being. More so than men, I think, although it is shifting. I do see a lot of, some, men getting out there and doing their thing and weightlifting and showing off their bodies and stuff. So it's
Absolutely.
like, it's definitely like changing. But I think that women are more apt to share and feel it. It is an element, like for me, and I can only speak for me personally, I really like the people that like my music, and I like talking to them, and I like sharing with them, and they DM me and they message me and they tell me that they like the album, and they tell me which songs they like, and they follow, and they try to watch the videos when I send them links, and they post on my Instagram, and they like stuff. And like for me, it's also a relationship that you have with people that like your music. So that's been building over time. I mean, when I started out in 2020, putting the Restless Dreams of Youth out, I started with 0 followers on Instagram. I had to like connect with people. I actually really like that. That's another part of this that I like. So yes, I like you look great, your hair looks great. I still like that, but I also like when somebody
random guy from Brazil is like, oh, you're so hot. It's like, okay, thanks.
Yeah, but I'm like, but I always respond with, hey, check out the link in my bio to listen to my music. I am the...
Appreciate it. Thanks. Listen to the music.
Yes, yeah. I will always sell my music first before anything else. So, but everybody knows that, like, knows me, like, they know that, like, this is my art. And if you were responding to songs, like, it's very meaningful for me.
Yeah.
Because, like, I can listen, like we can listen to our own shit and be super happy. But it's so much more meaningful to share it. Because then you know that, like, to get those kinds of DMs where somebody's like, I love, you look great in that photo. And by the way, I love track 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just like makes your day. It's just funny because things always change. And so maybe what you're saying is like 10, 20 years down the line, they might read this. But like some of the songs that were huge hits, like, are offensive as fuck today.
Yeah.
For like sure. Nick Gilder, Hot Child in the City, or there's a bunch
Cherry
of songs.
Pie by Warrant or something like that.
Yeah, or even that Bruce
Anything
Springsteen
by
song.
Motley Crue.
Yeah, or, hey little girl, is your daddy home? Like,
oh yeah.
like yeah, like, I mean, it's still Bruce Springsteen, and I love Bruce Springsteen, and
yeah.
the times they are a changing, as Mr. Dillon said.
Yeah.
So,
Well, speaking of times that are changing and wildly offensive albums 40 years from now, let's talk about your new album, Good Times for a Change.
oh God, I hope it's not going to be wildly offensive. I feel like it's
40
pretty
years from now.
tame.
40 years from now.
Okay, 40 years from now. Yes, so this is it. Okay, wait, because guess what I just got in today. Hold on, I'm going to show you. Hold on. Got the vinyl in.
Nice.
So
it's
the
ready to go.
vinyl, and literally when I got home today, I was getting ready for this podcast.
Nice.
This album is the fourth in 4 years, and I am in an in-between state right now. In between wanting to move forward with my life. A lot of the things I hold on to are the grief and mourning for my father's death, which still sort of just changed the very essence of who I am. And
yeah, it was
the
2021, I think, right?
Yeah, and the sadness from that, it's like when somebody dies, that is like the most important like rock figure in your life, like a literal like the person. You lose like every sense of anything, and I really changed a lot. And also because so now 4 years have passed, I feel guilty sometimes not thinking about him every day, and I'm holding on to the sadness because I don't want to let that go, because all he is now is in my head. He's just living there. And that's a lot of what this album is about. Like when you don't want to let go of certain things, but you know you need to, you kind of live in this twilight of the in-between. And this album, you know, the title, Good Times for Change, is the first line of a Morrissey song, or it's Smith song, Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want. He sings, you know, good times for a change. And I love that line. I've loved that line forever. And I think that you try to convince yourself, like, good times for a change, you know, or good times to make a change in your life. And you just sit there and you think, can I change? Do I want to change? Is it a good time for change? Are these good times for a change? And all of those meanings on this album is what it's about. And if you listen to the lyrics, it's a lot about that being in between and just accepting the present. I heard, and this is on the last song called Coming Round to Me Again, you know, that being in the past and being in the future are just not safe, and they're not helpful because they don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Or they don't exist anymore, or do exist at all yet.
Yeah.
And really the safest place is to be in the present and to exist in your body and in the moment. Otherwise, you're not really living. And it's a heavy idea, but I think that's what this album is about. A lot about relationship, communication. And that's a big theme in my music in general, is just like communication issues, because I struggle with that and overthink things and tend to spiral. So yeah. And then there's a couple songs on here that were from the past demos that I brought back to life because I thought they fit the album really well. And you know, it's always one of those things, though, to be honest, where you are chasing your last song that you wrote. For me, not everybody doesn't think that way, but I do. I think like I'm only as good as the last song I wrote. And the last thing I did, and a lot of people really like Tiny Injuries, and it was a really good album. And I was surprised at how many people really liked that, and actually were introduced to me from that album, because that first single on that album really reached farther than any other album. That was exciting, but then that kind of put some pressure a little bit on this one. Like, I hope people like it as much.
I really like the up tempo songs, but I also like, Good Impression, That's Not a Lie, and You Trigger Me. I think are probably three of my favorite songs because they're up tempo. But then, like the end song coming around to me again, that epicness of that, like even just the way it kind of ends epically.
Yes.
Those big crashes and stuff in there, and it's like. I think, was that the song you were talking about? It was kind of like Lana Del Rey inspired.
Yeah, the beginning, definitely. Yeah. In fact, the end with the drums came to me in sort of a inspiring moment on my walk when I listened to the song, because actually it ended without any drum. It just ended. And I felt unfinished about it. I felt unsure I felt like it didn't have the impact I wanted. And so because it was unfinished. It was an unfinished emotion, like good night. But it's not good night. It's never good night. And I don't ever have good nights. I don't sleep well. Like literally.
It's a to be continued, goddammit.
Yes. And so I figured I'm just going to do this epic fade out with some fucking hardcore drums and big muff pedal and just kind of go crazy. My favorites... Currently, it changes, but I think my favorite currently is I Don't Mind. I really like that one because I like the story behind it and the intention behind it. It's it's very much about the theme. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, coming around to me again right now. And That's Not a Lie.
Let's talk about what you have coming up. Obviously, I know about your album release, but let me know kind of what do you have more coming? Like, obviously, you're obviously going to keep writing songs. You're going to keep recording songs. But like you said, you don't play a lot of shows. But when you do, it's kind of a special thing. So talk to me about
have a big
what
show
you have
coming
up.
Yeah, we have a big show in Chicago. I'm opening for Material Issue. They go by Material Reissue now because Jim, is no longer with them. But the two surviving members have Phil and Gotti filling in for Jim's parts, and they're amazing. And I'm flying to Chicago with my band, and we're going to open for them because I'm friends with Mike. So Mike Zelenko, the drummer, played in my band Starball. And so I'm going to come out and do a solo set, and then at the end of my solo set, Starball is going to have a few songs ending my set, and Mike's going to actually come out and play on those.
I feel like that's some spoiler alert there.
I know, it's going to be awesome. And I'm going to have, luckily, all my albums, I'll have the new record there to sell. That's a big one for me. It's sort of a homecoming, to go back to a place that you kind of cut your teeth on making music is cool. And then after that, I'm just going to do some local stuff. I like doing singer-songwriter nights because it's less stressful, and also I can work on honing the storytelling part of my singing and how I present the song. And I like when people respond to my song in that sort of arena because it's so naked and bare. Yeah. And if the song makes an impact that way, then it's got something to it, and it's got some teeth, Yeah. Another thing that's on the horizon for me that I'm going to try to do some more live streaming. And the live streaming would be in conjunction with like playing and telling stories about some of my songs, and then also maybe playing some influences of me. So I'm like, this is something I may want to do, is put a little show together, like a live streaming show, because I love music.
From your perspective, what do you hope that rock music will become for you and other female artists in the years to come? This is where you can get that philosophy degree all in one. 30-second answer.
It's tough because there's so much music as it is that a lot of really amazing talent, I would say me included, are going to stay in our little tiny lane because we don't have the capacity behind us to be signed by a major, and major labels aren't doing what they used to do with people anyway. There's no artist development. There's like, if you have a hit on TikTok, then we better fucking give her $1 million and try to make some money off of it. And so many people I've seen horror stories like that, like some female musicians that I follow on TikTok, they had had some sort of viral hit, and then they got scooped up from a label, and then you never heard from them again. What do I hope would happen? I hope that it would continue, that everybody can do their own thing. I mean, you've got your playlists, you've got it's moving in that direction of like true, genre-based playlists and sound-based playlist and motion. You can go on Spotify and find a playlist for everything. Breakfast making music, brushing my teeth music. Like, it's happening already.
That's the most rockin' one right there. Have you heard that playlist? It's awesome.
But I'm going to now. I just made that up, but there probably is one. But I feel like what I would wish to happen is artist development comes back. Yeah. And that labels start to look for artists that have put out music they're on their own for a couple years already and are pushing their stuff and promoting their stuff and are serious about it. Yeah. And not putting their money into a one-hit wonder on TikTok that they got lucky on, but like looking at their backlog, looking at their life story, and looking at that artist development, because those are the ones that are going to be the long-term investments anyway. That's my wish. Yeah. What I think is going to happen is just more diversification. And we're just going to have to push more and pay more to get an ad on Instagram. We're going to have to pay more to have people, write about us. There's already these sites now, where you
want a
send
press
your
release? Give us $15.
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And that in some aspects I like that if you get responses from people that are for real authentic publications.
Yeah.
But there's garbage dumps out there. That garbage dumps, and then you're expected as the artist. It always comes back to the artist because you're passionate and they prey on that passion. Mm-hmm. So, there's my philosophy right there.
Yeah, and I think for, a lot of people, and I don't want to be labeled here as mansplaining any of what you're saying, but for me, when I hear what you're saying is, it seems like, when people talk about paintings, right, they say, the painting's not the story. It's the artist that painted it. That's the story. That's why you pay $1 million, right?
Yes.
Music is the exact same fucking thing, but people only want to look at the music and go, this is all I hear and see. So this is what my senses are. Like it's, when you see, a bunch of splattered paint, you go, that's nothing. But then you're like,
yes.
Well, actually, this is the story of this person's life.
That's why these people disappear because, think about that one girl, Gail. I don't even know her last name. And she had like that A, B, C, D, E, fuck you and your mom and your sister and your... Remember that song?
I'm going to have to remove that for the copyright, obviously. But
oh, really?
I don't know.
Probably not because it wasn't even that
YouTube
close
will be like,
to the original.
You can't even have that.
But she was everywhere. And on the Tonight Show and everything. I haven't heard anything from the girl. And she's probably super talented. But they scooped her up on a major label. They tried to make as much money as they could on that song.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard a thing. And maybe it's because I'm just not following her, but like she was in my feed every second, Yeah. And she's just one example. So...
And I feel like anybody can write
it's
a pretty decent song, but it's like, can you repeat that, do different stuff? What's your longevity factor?
And it's like what you said, though. I wasn't that interested in her as a person. She didn't have a life story that drew me in. She was just, she wrote a really good song. If nothing else happened to your career, but you had a one-hit wonder and then you had to stop. And I was like, well, was it a really good one-hit wonder? Like, aha, like Take On Me.
Yeah.
And there's like, yeah, it was like a one-hit one that took over the world. And I'm like, I'd be okay with that if I liked the song.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and I think it depends on what they mean by stop, right? So, like, if you had to stop playing publicly or altogether, like, if I wrote one really good song that became famous and, made a couple $1 million, would I stop playing music completely? Probably not. I don't think there's any way I could do that. But
right. Oh,
if I had to stop releasing music publicly, I'd be like, I'll take $2 million and be okay with that. Yeah, because I've never made that money before.
I know. I think it was more like, would you be happy just being known for this one song?
Yeah,
I think that was more of the question. And I'm like, well, let's put it this way: if you like "Take On Me" by Aha a lot, you might have explored their catalog. Yeah. Like, it always at least gives the opportunity to explore the artist's catalog. Like, at least it's out there for people to actually have that opportunity rather than not being out there at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of bands that, I've heard on the radio growing up, and I'm like, no desire to listen to that, but it is a popular song, so I'm forced to listen to it. But then there's bands that, like, especially back in the 90s before, streaming music, you'd hear one song, you'd go buy their album because it's the only way you could actually take it home with you, right? So you're like, I remember like Cracker, for example, that band Cracker, and I was like, I love that song. I think it was Low or something like that.
Yes,
I was like,
it's
I
called
really
Low.
love this song. I went and bought the album and I was like, but that song is good. Like, there was some good stuff in there, but it was like, could live without it.
Yes, and you can tell, a lot of times you can tell from the single what the album's going to be.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, let's
Better
talk
Than
about,
Ezra was another one. I was like, love this song. And then I bought the album. I was like,
Yes, exactly. Or like Marcy's Playground.
Yeah.
or
Yeah, people still love that band. Like, if you mention Marcy's Playground to some people, they're like, "What do you mean that one song? They have tons of good songs." I'm like, Jesus Christ, I didn't know anyone was so,
I never
so
explored.
defensive.
So maybe that's one of those bands that have a bunch of songs.
Yeah.
It is a really cool song. Really liked that song because it was different.
Yeah.
I am trying to stay in the present because I feel like I get extremely anxious when I think of the past and the future. So thinking about the future and what will happen with music is daunting and maybe even slightly depressing. So I'm in the moment, got my vinyl on, got my CDs in, meeting you, talking with you, and like, that's the moment. This is what matters right now.
Nice. I'm glad that I'm the only thing that matters right now.
Exactly. Well, there you go. Loved it.
Yeah, well, I do appreciate your time and obviously spending, well over an hour talking. So
that's fun.
That's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you learned anything or liked what you heard on the show today, please show us some support and subscribe to this channel and like, comment, and share this video with a friend or put it up on social media. I hate to keep asking, but without those small actions, the YouTube bots pretty much ignore this channel. Putting these videos out is a lot of work, and if you want to show your appreciation, please consider purchasing some of our musical accessories or merch from our store at poweredbyrock.com. You can read our blog and follow us in the links below as well. Those are the plugs, and that's all I have. I'll see you soon for the next episode. Until then, rock on.
Supposed to be